So, folks, at this recording, we are less than 48 hours out from the polls opening on Election Day, Tuesday, November 5th. We do now have, in addition to some late polls, we have some early voting data. So, Washington Post reports early voting turnout high as nearly 47% of 2020 electorate cast ballots. To a striking extent, Americans are not waiting for Election Day to vote. More than 74 million people had already cast their ballots as of Saturday, which is nearly 47% the total number cast in the 2020 presidential election. That includes 4 million voters in Georgia, or 80% of the total. 80% of the total that voted there in 2020. That is a huge early vote turnout in Georgia. 80% of the total 2020 turnout have already voted in Georgia. In the battlegrounds of Arizona and North Carolina, roughly half of eligible voters have already shown up. Half of eligible voters already shown up in Arizona and North Carolina. That means you already have a turnout north of 50% guaranteed. And then that's plus Election Day turnout. And in 3 states, Connecticut, Delaware, and South Carolina, early voting has surpassed 2020 levels. While nationwide rates of early voting aren't quite as high as they were at this time in 2020, they're significantly higher than in 2016 or any previous election year. Now, understand, 2020 was an especially high year for early voting since a lot of people were afraid to vote in person on the day of because it would be too crowded and they might get the thing. And, of course, Democrats were especially fearful of that, which is something you have to keep in mind when we look into these numbers. Some have been surprised by the turnout, especially after former President Donald Trump and many Republicans spent years falsely asserting that early and mail voting was less reliable than voting on Election Day. This year, Trump has shown more openness to early voting, especially in the final days of campaigning. Yes, this year, Trump is actually telling his supporters to go vote, as opposed to this
That's
time.
An idea.
Last time, it's a hell of a closing pitch. Don't vote. Don't vote. Don't vote early. Wait till the last minute.
That'll show them.
Yeah, right. The number of early vote ballots is expected to continue rising before Election Day. In recent rallies in battleground states, Trump and Harris have implored their supporters and undecided voters to cast their ballots early. So, if we look, this is a map of the 50 states. You could see the color key in the top there. 2024 early votes as a share of early voting in 2020. So, at this publication, which was yesterday evening, 9:04 p.m., you already had early vote in South Carolina and Connecticut past 2020 levels. Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Louisiana at north of 90%, which means they've certainly passed them by now. Now you're talking about a guarantee that they will surpass early voting from 2020. 2 out of those 4 swing states, of course, north of 90% are the swing states of Georgia and North Carolina. So you're seeing very, very high early voting turnout, including in 2 of those swing states. And then even in some other swing states, obviously Michigan, you have north of 80% of 2020's total, Nevada, north of 80%, and then Arizona, north of 70%. So pretty high numbers in the early voting. And who is doing most of this early voting? Well, women. Women. Am I right? Dem see signs for optimism in gender gap in early vote. That's right. Politico reports there's a new kind of gender gap in the 2024 election. Women are voting early in huge numbers, far outpacing men. It's giving anxious Democrats who see female voters as key to a Kamala Harris victory newfound hope leading into the final week of the campaign. Across battlegrounds, there's a 10-point gender gap in early voting so far. Women account for roughly 55% of the early vote, while men are around 45%, according to a Politico analysis of early vote data in several key states. The implications for next week's election results are unclear. Among registered Republicans, women are voting early more than men too, but the high female turnout is encouraging to Democratic strategists who expected that a surge in Republican turnout would result in more gender parity among early voters.
You see what happens, Larry, when you fuck a stranger in the ass?
Right, exactly. It's impossible to know who these women are voting for, including whether Democrats are winning over unaffiliated or moderate Republican women disillusioned with former President Donald Trump. But the gender gap has been one of the defining features of the 2024 campaign, and Harris allies see the lack of a surge of male voters as an encouraging sign. In some states, women are actually exceeding their vote share from 2020, which at this point is shocking to me, says Tom Bonnier, a Democratic strategist and CEO of the data firm Target Smart. I never would have bet on that. In Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia, 4 huge swing states, obviously, there is at least a 10-point gap between men and women in the early vote, according to Politico's analysis and data from the University of Florida's United States Election Project. Similar gender data is not available for other battlegrounds, including Arizona, Wisconsin, and Nevada. And polling continues to show that driving up female turnout is, on the whole, helping the vice president. A recent ABC Ipsos poll shows Harris with a 19 percentage point lead among suburban women, up from 10 points in October, and now President Joe Biden's 6-point lead in 2020. At the same time, Harris has cut Trump's 27-point margin of victory in 2020 with white women without a college degree in half, a recent Marist poll shows. So that ABC poll there, Harris with a 19-point lead among suburban women, that's double what it was last month. That is a huge lead among suburban women. And it's not surprising because this is the pitch they've been making. They've been targeting their campaign specifically to these kinds of voters. It's also not clear that the increased turnout among women is uniformly beneficial for Democrats, given the significant numbers of Republican women who are showing up to early vote as well. We're seeing an increase in Republicans of all types, gender, men and women, voting. It's just that women are still ahead and keeping pace, said Michael McDonald, a professor at University of Florida who tracks early voting data as part of his United States election project. Politico's analysis of early voting data in Pennsylvania found that women registered as Democrats made up nearly a third of early votes this year from people who did not vote in the state in 2020. According to Target Smart's analysis, Black and Latino women under the age of 30 are not only showing up at higher rates than their male peers, but by even a larger margin than they did in 2020. That finding is echoed by internal data shared with Politico by the progressive women-focused organization Supermajority, which is targeting many of these women. More than a third of the 3.6 million low-propensity women the organization is focused on turning out have already voted. So that's over 1 million, which Democrats see as a good sign, given that infrequent voters tend to vote later on Election Day. So here is a snapshot of the early voting in Pennsylvania. Now, of course, they don't release results who they voted for until Tuesday. So we don't have those numbers in yet. We have some exit polls. We have polls where people have been asked who they voted for, but we're not actually counting votes in that scenario. That is still sort of an exit poll type of thing. But these numbers here, early voting in Pennsylvania, 1.7 million mail-in and early in-person votes cast, 57% from registered Democrats, 33% from registered Republicans, 10% other independent remain. The rest, as you can see, those numbers fairly closely match the mail-in ballots requested line as well. And the gender gap, early voting in Pennsylvania, 56% women, 43% men. Now in Georgia, which compositionally, of course, much more heavily Republican than Pennsylvania, you have Democrats at 45%, Republicans at 48% with 7% other. That's on mail-in and early in-person votes cast. Of the 300,000 plus mail-in ballots requested, obviously you have that lopsided in the Democrats' favor so far, at least as of this reporting. That has not translated to turnout, where Republicans have outvoted Democrats by a narrow margin, but have still outvoted Democrats. And you can see here the gender gap in Georgia, essentially the same as it is in Pennsylvania. In North Carolina, another key swing state, this is really interesting. Again, this is a state in which Republicans have Democrats out-registered. You have it basically tied. 32% Democrat, 34% Republican in the early vote and mail-in vote, 34% independent early vote turnout in North Carolina, which is a very interesting number. Once again, the gender gap north of 10 points. So here it is laid out more simply. In Arizona, you have a 6-point gender gap. Nevada, just a 2-point gender gap. But all the rest of those swing states, Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina, Michigan, and Wisconsin, you have a very healthy gender gap with women outpacing men pretty significantly in the early vote. These are exit polls, so to speak. So this is still a poll. Once again, these are not election results. This is a poll of people who have voted already. Of people who voted already, 61% in Michigan say they have voted for Kamala to 35 for Trump, 60 for Kamala in Wisconsin to 38 for Trump, 57% in Pennsylvania to 40 for Trump. Now, this is not an apocalyptic situation for Republicans because it has been a tale as old as time. Democrats tend to vote early. Republicans tend to vote on election day. Having said that, given the turnout numbers in the early vote and the gender gap in the early vote, this creates a heavy lift for Donald Trump. Is it a lift that is beyond him? Not necessarily. Is it impossible? Of course not. Is there any guarantee he's not capable of overcoming this? No. But what these numbers tell you, in conjunction with the volume of early voting and the gender gap in early voting, is that the Democrats have cleared the first hurdle, which is turn out your people. Like I'm pretty confident that the Democrat turnout is going to be pretty high. I think you could say that with a good degree of confidence, which is also always the first hurdle in any race, turn out your base. Now the Republicans have to turn out their base, and they have to do better with independents than some of these numbers suggest they're doing, which brings us to this. The Des Moines Register Iowa poll, Iowa, which had gone pretty solidly red the past 2 times, Kamala Harris leapfrogs Donald Trump to take lead near Election Day. Here's how. This is the Des Moines Register poll. This is a gold standard poll. Very reputable poll, as we'll get into later. Kamala Harris now leads Donald Trump in Iowa, a startling reversal for Democrats and Republicans who have all but written off the state's presidential contest as a certain Trump victory. A new Des Moines Register Mediacom Iowa poll shows Vice President Harris leading former President Trump 47% to 44% among likely voters just days before a high-stakes election that appears deadlocked in key battleground states. The results follow a September Iowa poll that showed Trump with a 4-point lead over Harris and a June Iowa poll showing him with an 18-point lead over Democratic President Joe Biden, who was the presumed Democratic nominee at the time. Quote, "It's hard for anybody to say they saw this coming," said pollster J. Ann Selzer, president of Selzer and Company. She has clearly leaped into a leading position. There you can see the trend lines on the chart there. In 2020, the Register's Iowa poll showed that Biden and Trump were tied among all likely voters in September, but the final poll before Election Day that year showed independents breaking for Trump, and he ultimately won by 8 points over Biden. This year, independents appear to be turning the other way toward Harris, a move fueled by a growing support among independent women. Independent likely voters who have supported Trump in every other Iowa poll this year now favor Harris 46 to 39%. Now, this next slide features a highlighted passage. That is my highlighted passage, not the publications. But I highlighted this because this is the crusher, if true. Asterisk, if true. Do we know for certain this is not an outlier? No, we don't. We do know for certain this has a very strong history of accuracy, this poll. This is the number. This is the 5-alarm fire if you're Donald Trump. Now, independent women choose Harris over Trump 57-29. That's up from September when independent women gave her just a 5-point lead, 40-35. Independent men still favor Trump 47-37. Numbers that are largely unchanged from September when independent men supported him 46-33. Overall, Harris holds a 20-point lead with women, 56-36, similar to where she was in September. But Trump's lead with men has shrunk from 27 points in September, 59-32, to 14 points today. Okay, I'll take a brief pause there. I'll toss to Russell in a second. That number up there, independent women choosing Harris, 57-29. This is in a state that Trump won pretty handily twice before. If that number is in the same ballpark as what the actual number is, even if it's off by 20%, if that is anywhere close to accurate in Iowa, that means it's close to accurate in more purple states than Iowa, which spells major, major trouble for Donald Trump. There was always a chance, and we have said this every time we have talked about the odds of this race. There was always a chance that at the end of the day, this would come down to women choosing a pro-choice first woman president over the man who killed Roe v. Wade. That was always a chance. And the early voting, both in terms of the volume of the turnout, the gender gap of the turnout, and this poll here, which I'm about to show you, has a history of accuracy. Final Seltzer poll findings and the actual result. As you can see, going back to 2012, they predicted Dems +5. The actual result, Dems +6. 2014 Senate race, R +7. Actual result, R +8. 2016, R +7, R +9. As you can see, the only race they called wrong was 2018, which was the midterms, where despite the Democrats doing well overall, they struggled in statewide races, just like the Republicans struggled in statewide races last midterm. As you can see, aside from that year, 6 out of the last 7, they nailed almost perfectly. So if that number is accurate, Donald Trump has a major, major lift on Election Day. Major. And like I said, there was always a chance this would come down to that. And early voting suggests it just might. We have a few more pieces here, but anything to add while we're stopped?
Yes. I have always thought that Trump's political ability was more apparent than real. 2016 was a very weird combination of circumstances. You had a population furious that Barack Obama had campaigned on hope and change and only brought hope and change for bankers and threw everybody else under the bus. So you had a lot of people looking for revenge for that. Hillary Clinton has been one of the most despised figures in politics for decades, and she has no skills whatsoever. She's somebody who could not campaign her way out of that because her poll numbers would always go down when she campaigned. That was a pattern throughout her political career. Her poll numbers would go down the more she would campaign. It was a weird combination. And also the media, the party establishment did not see it coming at all. They were completely blind to the possibility, and they didn't take it seriously. That's never happening again. 2016 was a very odd year. 2020, of course, you have COVID and all of that, and the Democrats certainly did not run a great candidate themselves. But nonetheless, Donald Trump, in a crisis, a president normally gets more popular.
That's right.
And yet, Donald Trump lost to a fucking zombie. He
Yep.
lost to a zombie who never left his basement in a crisis. So what happened from there? Most of Trump's supported candidates, most of the candidates he backed most visibly, failed. Herschel Walker failed.
Yep.
Oz failed. Meanwhile, this whole, well, Trump outperforms his polls. Well, since Dobbs, it's the Democrats that outperform their polls. The Democrats, Dobbs is such a powerful issue. The Democrats swung an election in fucking Kansas. In Kansas. So what does that tell you about their potential in purplish states? There are a lot of Republican women who are going to secretly vote for Kamala. It's not just their propaganda. Oh, yeah, I know they like to fall back on the safetyism. Oh, yes, even if you have to vote for us secretly. I know they play it, but there is a reality there that they're referring to.
Oh, absolutely.
There
Fox
are-
News was panicking about it. They did a segment on the 5, Jesse Waters. I could see if my wife voted for Kamala, it would be as if she had an affair. They were worried about that.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah,
That's
right. Which
helpful.
again.
You're just playing into it. And
Right.
and listen, I know we have some people in our audience who for whom Trump and whatever he's doing and calling it a campaign is appealing to you. We're not here to lie to you like a lot of commentators will. A lot of people who tell you what you like to hear, they don't actually believe that. They make money off telling you what you want to hear. We're
course.
not going to do that. It's not a put down to you, but I am telling you that this whole tech bro roadshow thing that Trump is calling a campaign is a big turnoff to a lot of people. I would argue most people. Whatever that Madison Square Garden thing is, listen, man, people are not sitting there going, oh, he was referring to landfill. They just see it. They get the sense of what's going on there. And they say,
Exactly.
I
Even
don't
beyond the
know.
substance of the
Most
joke.
people are not sitting here watching shows like this.
No, just
They-
the
they just-
aesthetic.
Just the aesthetic, just
The
the
vibe.
vibe, just the levitating Elon and all of this.
A campaign
don't-
rally should not look like the inside of an iPod.
Right.
Right. That's what I would say. I mean, that's what this is. Like it looks like
It's
the inner
it's
workings
very
of an iPod.
It's very podcast bro. It's a
Yeah.
podcast bro roadshow.
Yes.
That is what Trump's been calling a campaign. It's very online. It's very rescue the republic. I hate to tell you, most of those people that rescue the republic are repulsive, off-putting, and creepy to normal people.
Yep.
Normal people are gonna watch fucking Jordan Peterson with his fucking Harvey Dent suit and fucking Russell Diddy hard-boiled egg brand over there with his conversion, and it's just a freak show. It's just a freak show. These are the people that at this point in the public mind they think of Donald Trump because that's what he's surrounded himself by. It's a very bro-y, very online, very manosphere kind of thing. Oh, shocker. Women are overwhelmingly deciding, you know what? We just can't have this. Even independent women, even Republican women. They were already a greater share of the electorate than men, alienating them to this extent when you already have Dobbs there, which already gave you a very high chance that this was going to happen. And then Trump ran this very manosphere kind of campaign.
Yep.
Well, you shouldn't be surprised.
Nope.
So, yeah. Just like in 2016, I thought one of the two campaigns theory of the case was going to prove to be correct, and there was going to be no in between. It was either Trump's theory that there was a hidden vote that was going to show up because he was running so differently from any other Republican that people who would not bother to vote for Mitt Romney would show up to vote for him, or Hillary, that we represent the parts of the country that are growing, and that was going to turn out to be right. It was either Trump was going to squeak it out or she was going to win by 3 to 4. That was what I thought in 2016. This year, it's that Kamala is such an empty vessel who got to the position of being the nominee without a single vote, that in the end, she's just not going to have the support behind her that she would need to overcome Trump's advantages in the Electoral College, or Dobbs, and the way we've seen even special elections go since Dobbs, are going to be so overwhelming in terms of what it's going to do to the female vote, to Democratic turnout, that it's actually going to be a blowout for Democrats. And I don't think there's any in between. At this point, based on what we've seen, I think it's the latter much more likely than the former.
So what I would just add to that is that, you know, if we had no respect for the audience whatsoever, we would just tell you, yeah, Trump's got it in the bag, and they cheated if he loses, right? I mean, and half the people who tell you that don't actually believe that. They say that because they know that's what you want to hear. They know that you'll click on it. They view you as nothing but a farm for subscriptions and ad revenues and likes and subs and blah, blah, blah. But we said there was always a chance that this would happen. And why the sudden turn, right? Because it was looking like Trump might have it. And I said all along this could go either way, and it still could go either way. I'm not as confident as Russ, but it still could go either way. The reason why we're talking like this now, and the reason why the betting markets have tightened dramatically, is because now we are getting an answer. We're starting to get an answer. We don't have the full picture yet, but we're starting to get an answer of what the electorate looks like based on the early voting numbers. And the last-minute polling by an A-rated poll like the Des Moines Register with that wide a gap in independent women, Kamala Harris for Donald Trump. We're not just basing it on polls now. We're actually now you're getting actual turnout numbers, and that's what's moved the betting market. So in addition to the Des Moines Register poll, you have the New York Times Siena poll, Simon Atiba, hardly a Democrat stooge. This guy's good. He calls it right down the middle. In a shocking, stunning reversal, Kamala Harris now leads Donald Trump in 4 of the 7 battleground states, according to the New York Times. Nevada, Kamala +3. North Carolina, Kamala +2. Wisconsin, Kamala +2. Georgia, Kamala +1. Tied in Pennsylvania. Tied in Michigan. Trump with the lead in Arizona. That just came out this morning. Now, Atlas Intel, which was a very, very accurate poll in 2020, has Trump up everywhere. This is why I say no guarantee. No guarantee. Based on the early numbers, we know the Democrats seem to be hitting their marks. Could Trump hit his marks on Election Day? Absolutely. Absolutely possible. This is not in the bag for either candidate. And just so you can see here, the CEO of elections tweets out 2024, according to 2 different A-plus rated pollsters, Selzer and Atlas Intel. So if the electorate looks like the Des Moines Register poll and her numbers are accurate, you have this, which is kind of cartoonish. No one really expects this to happen, but this is what the electoral map would look like if the Des Moines Register demographics were spot on and replicated nationwide. And by contrast, this is the Atlas Intel map, which more closely resembles a plausible map in the eyes of quite a few people. So what is the picture here? The picture here is that I still wouldn't bet $1 on this race. I don't feel confident enough to call it one way or another. But what I can say now is I believe that there is a greater than 50-50 chance at this point that the electorate this year will much more closely resemble 2022 than 2016, which means you're going to see Democrats outperform polls more than Republicans outperform polls. And I base that on the votes that have already been cast. The betting markets. This is an average of betting markets from Real Clear Politics. As you can see, a dramatic turn in the past couple of days. Trump had been steadily going up Kamala had been steadily going down. This sudden turn at the last minute is not because all the betting markets decided let's rig it at the last minute, because we have early vote reporting.
Right.
In the final days of the campaign, you get numbers of votes that have been counted. Now, we don't know who they voted for, but we know the demographic makeup, and we know that these final polls are showing a dramatic gap in Kamala's favor among independent suburban women. And if North Carolina has 34% independent turnout and women are outvoting men by 10%, well, you do the math, and what the math tells you is it's a heavy lift for Donald Trump. Is it insurmountable? No. I can't say that at all, but I could say it's a heavy lift. Here's Polymarket. This is Peter Thiel's company. These are not libs betting on this. Look at that. State of Pennsylvania, which could be the whole thing, 50-50, according to Polymarket. According to Peter Thiel's sites, which I'm sure has more of the Elon bros than shit libs putting money in there.
Yes.
They're calling it 50-50. And so, once again, there was always a strong possibility it would come down to the pro-choice first woman president versus the guy who killed Roe. It seems to me there's a better than 50-50 chance at this point that will be the most important factor. Am I sure that'll be the most important factor? Are we going to be talking about that on Wednesday morning? Maybe, maybe not. At this point, what the numbers tell me is that there's a greater than 50-50 chance that this, at the end of the day, is going to come down to women, many of whom in the privacy of the voting booth, voting for the first woman president, which, don't forget, they want the first woman president, too.
Right.
Women want to elect a woman president.
Yep.
They didn't want to elect Hillary Clinton enough to make her president because Hillary Clinton, let's face it, has a trail of dead bodies behind her on her way to the White House. And we know for a fact Hillary Clinton helped her husband, at the very least, the kindest thing you could say about her, helped her husband bully his victims of sexual abuse into silence. That we know for a fact, that he abused women sexually and she helped him get away with that. All right? The rape stuff, I'm 99% confident of. But we know for a fact, no doubt. So she was, and then she jumps in front of the feminism parade. That was repulsive to a lot of women, but women want to elect a woman. Are they going to vote for the guy who killed Roe v. Wade over the first woman president?
Right.
I just don't see it. And I don't see there being a surge in MAGA support that is enough to overpower that. Because the MAGA bros, don't forget, the bro vote, here's the thing about the bro vote, not to be mean, they don't vote very often, and when they do, they vote one at a time. Let's be honest about that, right? So it's hard to rack up enough bro votes to win an election. And so, go ahead.
Yeah, and I saw somebody in the chat saying, they disagree because people are tired of being poor and talked down to. Yeah, your boy Elon came in last week promising economic catastrophe if Trump is elected. So a lot of those people who are poor and hanging on by their fingernails who heard that are not going to be highly motivated to vote Trump on the economic grounds.
Look,
literally, they are promising catastrophe, or his most visible spokesperson is promising catastrophe. What if you are like a typical American and you can't afford a $400 emergency, and this fucking jackass is literally telling you the week before the election to expect economic collapse if Trump is elected? How do you vote if you're in a desperate situation? They're literally telling you. They're promising you. That's their campaign promise. So don't assume that people see Trump at this point as the more secure option for their financial future.
Well, also, Mike Johnson coming out a week before the vote saying we're going to take a blowtorch to Obamacare. Right. That's not helpful either.
Right.
It's just not helpful. They did not close. We said they would. Look, the way this works is they were good up until mid-July. They were terrible from mid-July through mid-September. They straightened it out for most of October, but in a very close race, you have to close strong. You can't make errors. Just like the Yankees, they made 3 errors in 1 inning. Game 5 of the World Series, you can't be fumbling the ball like that at that moment that MSG rally was not good, and I'm not just talking about the joke.
Right.
The vibe was wrong.
The
That's
vibe.
what Megyn
The
Kelly
vibe is
said.
wrong.
It's too
Yep.
bro-tastic. It's the
Yes.
wrong vibe. It's not
Yep.
earthy.
Yep.
It's techie. It looks dystopian. There's something off about it. It does not
It
appeal.
looks like
to
fucking idiocracy.
normal people.
It
Right.
looks like idiocracy. Yeah. Hey, megamaniacs. It looks like fucking idiocracy. I'm sorry. If you like that, God bless you. But we're talking about how it plays
Right.
in an election. And I can't imagine most people didn't see that and think President Camacho.
Right. Yeah. So I will register my prediction. Now, look, again, the caveat here is for the set of polls that has Kamala up, there's a set of polls that has Trump up. Trump has generated turnout in the past. I would not be shocked if he does it again. So I'm just telling you what I think is more likely at this point. I put in the caveat. It would not surprise me at all if this were wrong, but it's my job to tell you what I think. We're in this business to tell you what we think. We have to register our predictions. And so my prediction is this. I believe Kamala is going to upset Trump in those two southern states of North Carolina and Georgia based on the abortion issue. There was a poll in South Carolina that had Kamala down only 7. I think if abortion is going to influence the vote, it's probably most likely to do it in those two southern states, which have governed on that issue as if they were Mississippi and Alabama. They are not.
Exactly.
You have Governor Piss and Pussy there in North Carolina dragging down the ticket by more than 10 points. You have Democrats blowing out the early vote turnout in Georgia. Those polls are close. My gut tells me she's going to pull it out there. I give Trump Arizona and Nevada because of the inroads he's made with Latinos. Arizona's a border state.
Oh, you gave it to Trump. Yeah.
I gave Arizona and Nevada to Trump because of the inroads with Latinos. Latinos also skew more socially conservative, which means, in my opinion, they're less likely to cast a protest vote over Dobbs. Arizona's a border state. Trump has been putting up very good numbers in Nevada this whole cycle, so I'm going to give him those two. In Wisconsin, I gave that to Trump. That could go either way. It's 50-50. I heard some reporting saying Democrats are not as confident there. They haven't made quite the investment there that they made in the other two Rust Belt states because there are fewer electoral votes to be had.
Where?
In Wisconsin. There's just less. It's less likely Wisconsin is going to be the difference maker because it's a smaller basket of electoral votes. So Democrats have not quite made the investment there as the other two upper Midwest states, Pennsylvania and Michigan, which, look, it breaks my heart to say this. I'm rooting for Abandon Harris to ruin this election for Kamala Harris. I hope I'm wrong about this. I hope that they eat shit in Pennsylvania, and I hope Kamala eats shit in Michigan, and that she loses, and we blame their support for genocide on the loss, and that Abandon Harris gets to stick it in their ass. That's what I hope happens. Again, it's my responsibility not to tell you what I hope happens, but what I think is more likely. The Michigan early vote looks strong for Democrats, as does the Pennsylvania early vote. And so I think they get those two, which gives you Kamala at 290, Trump at 248. This is a very, very, very fragile map. Couple things go sideways. It's a Trump win. That could totally happen. I'm only doing this because we have to. I would not bet a dime on this, but if I had to guess, that's my guess. Kamala 290, Trump 248. All right, Russ, we're going to show yours. There you go.
All right, so I am more bullish than Keaton, again, based on my logic that I don't really see a middle ground. I think you either have an enormous groundswell of women saying, fuck these guys. We cannot have this guy with his vote against IVF successor. I think he made a terrible mistake tactically, picking a guy like J.D. Vance. He should have picked Tulsi. Yeah, this might have been a whole different story if he had. It definitely would have undercut some of that pro vibe of his campaign.
That's true.
But he went with Vance, who voted against IVF, just doubled down, tripled down on his biggest vulnerability. And I think when you look at how the early vote is coming in, you're going to have a huge swing of women to the point that it could create a tidal wave against Republicans. So yeah, man, I'm on that basis. I don't like yourself. I don't feel strongly about it. I wouldn't put money on it. It could go the other way. I don't think it will though. In terms of state by state, who knows? You know, I'm going with the general theory of how Democrats have been performing in the last few elections, where they keep shocking way above in many of these elections, way above how they're polling. So that's why I gave Nevada and Arizona to Kamala. Swing states, I basically got her sweeping, except for Michigan. I may be too emotionally invested there, to be honest with you. But on a rational basis, when you got that many Muslims who are going to refuse to vote for Kamala Harris, I think they might succeed. If it wasn't for that, I would not have given it to them. But yeah. So, hang on. Oh yeah. No.
Did you give Trump New Hampshire by accident? Or do you think he's going to win New Hampshire? You gave Trump New Hampshire. That may have been a mistake.
Oh, did I? Yeah.
Maybe it's possible. He could. Okay, that's a mistake.
I mean, it was an accident. Yeah.
All right. So you're at Kamala 308, Trump 230. That's what you're basically saying there.
Basically, yes. I'm saying I think it's pretty much going to be a blowout. I think what the lesson of this election is going to end up being, you're right. I could be wrong.
Could be wrong.
I think the lesson is going to end up being Trump and what he represents is much more fringe than people thought it was, because he won one fucking election in a very weird year.
It could also be, look, I mean, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here, putting the cart before the horse, but if MAGA blows this election, you are truly looking at a Republican Party in shambles, to the point where I think Kamala is the 90% favorite in 4 years. I do, because if they lose this election, you're going to have to give your platform
the whole party one have to
rewrite.
Be rethought.
Your platform is going to need a rewrite from page one. If they lose again, this is nothing about this is etched in stone. If they lose this election, they simply cannot move forward with this abortion position.
No.
It is not viable.
No.
We said in 2022 they were going to have to solve this by 2024. They have not solved it. I think it's better than 50-50 odds. It comes back to bite them.
Yep.
This video is forever. We eat shit on election night. It'll be fun either way.
It's unfortunate we don't disagree, because then we could have been half right.
That would have been the best insurance policy.
We're either going to be completely right or completely wrong as a show.
Yep. And look, this is why I put the caveat in here. I could be completely wrong. What we know now is half the picture. We know that the Democrats are hitting their numbers in the early vote. That seems to be undeniable. It seems undeniable. You have Black and Latino women under 30 surging in Pennsylvania. You got Democrats outvoting Republicans by 25 points in Pennsylvania. Women outvoted. All the signs point to Democrats hitting their targets. That puts tremendous pressure on Trump to not only hit his targets, but to really improve among independents. Don't forget these upper Midwestern states. These are Democrats out-register Republicans in these states. Trump needs to run it up with independents. And if that Iowa register poll is accurate and independent women are breaking for Kamala 2-1, then he's got no shot. He's got to hope that's not accurate. He just has to try his best. I mean, I don't know what you could do at this point except hope.
But you got to hope that's wrong. Based on the turnout, I think it is.
I think it is too. And don't forget, Iowa's a more red state than these states.
At that point, if that's accurate, you're looking at a blowout.
Yeah, I mean, if that's accurate, like I said, I'm still giving him those two southwestern states because Latinos tend to be more socially conservative, and I think especially since Arizona is a border state and men are doing a little better there, and men are doing a little better in Nevada in terms of the early vote, I'm putting those in Trump's column. But you're right. I mean, with that kind of margin, it just creates very, very, very difficult math.
Yes,
for Trump, if that's true. And that is an A+ poll. So you want to say they rigged the poll? You could hope they rigged the poll. Okay, I mean, that's not like I said, if history is any guide, that's not something you can really bet on. That it's a fake poll. It's an A+ reputation poll saying independents in Iowa too. Don't forget, Iowa's a much redder state than these other swing states. If Kamala's blowing him out 2-1 among independent women in Iowa, that's devastating. If that number is accurate, there's no way Trump can win. There's no way he can win.
Right.
Again, it might not be accurate. We don't know.
This is where, hey, at the end of the day, yeah, if they had kept Biden, it might have, would have been like 49 states.
Oh,
it
yeah,
would have been like fucking Reagan Mondale.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, yeah, Kamala is the move, and I see some people being like, well, how does that make sense when this administration has been so bad economically? You know what? The play that Kamala is not Joe Biden, they kind of pulled it off, I think. They kind of pulled off the idea that, she's a separate thing, right? She's not the old white guy. She's not the old sundowning guy. It's a new day, blah, blah, blah. And she's running against Trump. Sure, man. If she were running against someone who was not Trump, she'd probably lose. But she's running against Trump. The idea that Trump is good at this, it's really not borne out by the record. He fucking he got blown out by a sundowning old nasty racist bastard in a crisis. That does not scream competence.
No. His negatives have always been very high. He's a turnout machine for Democrats since he was elected, since he caught them sleeping in 2016. Also, as for the economy, inflation is horrible. It really puts a strain on people. But
now
the other
it's
thing
not inflation; it's the prices that are left from inflation.
Well,
inflation now the last report it's down to 2.1, which is like back in normal range.
So look, so if you look at 2022, when the shock of inflation was really bad, I mean that was actually like giving people fits. Myself, also, like it was hard to make ends meet with groceries that high above normal. Now you're looking at, yes, prices are higher. 2 years down the road, people have adjusted to that more. When I drive past TGI Fridays on a Friday night, the fucking place is packed. Like, people have, I think, adjusted for it to the point where it's not, I don't sense the same rage as I sensed in 2022. I told you, the day before the midterms in 2022, I went to get a slice of pizza. I order a slice of pizza. I go to the bathroom. I come back. The guy's ranting and screaming about how expensive everything is. That shock was real at the time. The anger was raw and primal at the time, and still it did not outweigh the women vote in response.
Right. Look at how the midterms went.
2 years down the
middle
road,
of that. Yeah,
I think the price of groceries is more baked into people's everyday life, where they're now able to budget for it. Okay, maybe now you cut corners here or there. I think people have accounted for it to the point where I don't think the same shock and anger is there as it was in 2022, and it didn't overwhelm Democrats in 2022. And that's partly because there was another issue that had taken priority amongst people who vote. Don't forget, too, the people who dominate the polls are the normies who generally have the money they need to ride out inflation. Exactly. That's another point of this, too. That's a very sad point of it, is that people who are closer to the margins economically don't tend to vote as much. That's just a cold, hard fact. But in addition to all of that, just like in 2022, the Republicans never had a convincing argument for how they would bring inflation under control.
No. On top of this, Kamala, whether you believe she'll be inclined to do it or able to do it, even if she is or not, she is actually addressing what is the issue at this point, which is the price gouging. It's not the inflation. You don't walk in now and see the eggs 20% higher than they were last month. It's all stabilized at a higher level because inflation has come back to a normal level. You got these guys talking about austerity measures and promising to crash the economy.
Yeah.
And Kamala is actually at least talking about what the actual issue is. This is not an endorsement of Kamala, But in terms of what voters are hearing, even on that level, Kamala is actually talking about what's actually happening, that these prices are high. We need to bring these prices down. These guys are talking about fucking cutting government over here, bringing down inflation that at this point is not really happening.
Right.
So even on that level, they're off message.
Right. They never had it. Even when the shock of it was higher, they didn't have an answer for it.
Right.
They didn't have an answer for it. The reason why abortion moves the needle more is because people can very simply see a straight line between vote Democrat, keep abortion rights.
Right.
That's it. Now, you want to point to Obama said he was going to codify Roe and didn't? Yeah, we know all that. In the eyes of the average person, they equate Democrats with abortion rights. They equate Republicans with coming for those rights, and that could be the whole ball game. That could be Corinthians 2. We always said there was a possibility of that, and there was a lot of economic pain in 2022. There still is a lot of economic pain. The Republicans have still not formulated an answer on that. Unfortunately, tragically, nuclear war doesn't seem to really factor into the minds of most people. Israel, Gaza, unfortunately, tragically, doesn't seem to factor in the minds of most people. I hope, like I said, I hope Kamala shits the bed in Pennsylvania, and I hope it all comes down to Michigan, and I hope she shits the bed there. That's what I hope will happen. But big picture, and this will be my final point. Ultimately, and I've said this on the show in the past, I don't sense rebellion in the air. I sense resignation in the air. I sense exhaustion in the air. I sense a population that is half asleep. I sense a population that is basically sleepwalking into irrelevance. I see an empire that is just winding down quietly like a dying animal, going off to live its last days in peace. I don't sense that frantic primal rage that I sensed in 2016. Call it vibes, call it what you want. It was in the air that something big was about to happen. I don't sense that this time. I just sense people have settled in to what the fate of this country is going to be. I don't think this country has another big fight in it. And so, I don't see a greater than 50% chance of Trump pulling this out at this point. I could absolutely be wrong. Don't bet a dime on it. I could absolutely be wrong. It could absolutely go the other way.
Whether the country has the fight in it or not, yeah, you could be right. I think if it does, Trump is not the object it's going to rest its faith in. And that is really what it comes down to. I think his winning in 2016 was a fluke. I don't think he can do it again.
All right. Well, we will see on Tuesday night what's going to be.
Please clap.